started shooting medium format about 1.5 years ago for two main reasons. I felt like I was missing out on a lot of fun cameras like the acid-etched, and I was getting jealous of seeing how good everyone's scans looked online. I wasn't developing my own film quite yet, so what I would do is I would have them sent out through McBain's, do develop only, and then bring it home to scan on my Epson V600. It came with this holder that can do medium format, but the results I was getting from my scans weren't quite what I wanted them to be. They weren't terrible, but they just weren't what I expected for such a large negative. So I was talking to an old coworker about how I was underwhelmed by my scans, and he hooked me up with this piece of A&R glass that came from Better Scanning. What this does is it helps to hold your negatives flatter. So A&R stands for anti-Newton ring, and according to Wikipedia, a Newton ring is an interference pattern created by the reflection of light between two surfaces. Essentially what they are these rainbowy circles that can show up on your negatives if you let them touch a reflective surface like the scanning glass. So a piece of A&R glass has two sides to it. One is reflective, which faces upwards towards the transparency unit. The other is a matted side, which will face down and touch your negatives. Because it's non-reflective, it won't show any Newton rings, and it'll keep your negatives flat. Like I mentioned in my last video about scanning, when you're using a flatbed like this, the flatter you can keep the negative, the better. The negatives tend to bow upwards, and because that focusing field is so narrow, you want to flatten it out to make sure that as much of the negative as possible can stay in the sharpest range of that focusing field. This piece that I have came from betterscanning.com, and unfortunately they're no longer around. So there are some alternatives that you can use. One is acid-etched anti-glare matte glass, and the other is gallery framing glass. Either of those, you should be able to take the dimensions, which I'll have in the description down below, and they can cut a piece from either of those for you. They should be fairly inexpensive, and this size will fit in any holder for an Epson V500, a 550, or the 600. So when it comes to the actual scanning, I start by cleaning off the piece of A&R glass, and then I'll clean off the scanner bed. For this, I just use a generic camera lens cleaner and a microfiber cloth. So I'll place the negative into the stock holder, and I'll make sure that the bowing side is facing upwards. On a side note, you'll see that I've removed this little bit that comes on top. You can just pull this out, and that's how you get your glass in. So then I'll take my piece of glass, I'll make sure that the matted side is facing down, and I'll just flatten the negative. The rest of the process is the same as I talked about in my last video about scanning. I'll open up Epson Scan, and I'll take a positive scan of it, import it into Lightroom, and use Negative Lab Pro to do the conversion. The only difference between what I do for 35mm film and medium format is I'll typically do two different exports from Lightroom. The first one is I export as JPEGs without touching the resolution. The second one, I usually cut the resolution in half, just so I have smaller file sizes. It's easier to share on social media, and no one will really notice on Instagram. So that's how I scan my medium format film. Next week, I'm looking to do a video about how I process color film, but everywhere seems to be out of stock on the kit that I use. So I'm looking to do either black and white or maybe ECN2. So tune in next week.